It's been so long since we last spoke. That was supposed to be a joke. No one really laughed. All right, so we last talked about heroic witness of the saints, the need for community, shared heart, shared vision with people who are a gift to us. I want to tell you a little bit about my story, my testimony, where I'm coming from, the ways that the Lord has kind of continually walked in my life. So I worked at Louisiana Right to Life for about 3.5 years. I basically was a youth minister for pro-life activists, high schoolers and college students. So this is a very comfortable audience for me because that's who I worked with for so long in my home state. And I basically ran pro-life camps to teach people how to be leaders. So this is kind of basically this, but Catholic. That's what I feel like I'm here right now for. So I did that for 3 years, and I actually got to meet a lot of really cool people. This is a picture from D.C. after the fall of Roe. If you know, the fall of Roe v. Wade happened on the Sacred Heart of Jesus feast day. The Catholics were very excited about that. I also have pro-life activists who are Christians and non-Christians and atheists, so it's just interesting that we all were kind of there together, even amidst all of our differences. This sign, of course, says "Grow Beyond Roe." I think it's really fitting and kind of talks about all the different things like activism and service to women and parenting families and things like that. That's what all those little flowers on the side are. So that's me in front of the Supreme Court. I was there the Sunday after. You know, when I look at this kind of picture and I see like the fall of Roe, I think of all the people who came before me who have been working against abortion since the 70s. And they really thought like, okay, we're going to like Roe v. Wade happened, but we're going to make this, we're going to put it into this in like 5 years. And they didn't think that they were going to have a 40, 50-year career. I know people who were like huge benefactors and huge players in the organization Louisiana Right to Life who died with Roe still being the law of the land. And it makes me sad sometimes to think about the fall of Roe and the people who worked way longer than I ever did, more than how long I've been alive. And they spent all of their careers and so much of their extra time trying to bring down Roe. And I just got to meet a lot of people and witness a lot of stories of people who experienced abortion. It's a prevalent issue. This is the number of abortions in America in 2020, 930,160. That's according to the Guttmacher Institute. They're one of the ones that do abortion statistics, also the CDC. So this is the number from Guttmacher, so right under 1 million. It fluctuates around that million. In the 90s when I was born, it was actually closer to 1.5 million, 1.5 million abortions per year. So very significant issue in our culture. So I know there's some people from Canada here, so I looked it up for you. This is the number for y'all, and that's just from 2015 to 2019. So still a significant number. So this is the number of abortions, and these are the number of people who've died according to the Guttmacher Institute, 2015-20. So this is not an insignificant issue, right? This is something that affects a lot of us. Like when I was growing up, when I grew up Catholic, I was a cradle Catholic. When I thought about abortion, it felt like, oh, that's a China thing. That happens in China because they have the forced abortion, or basically forced abortion kind of culture there. So it didn't feel like something that affected me. But it's actually something that's really affected all of us. There's a lot of people who are post-abortive. And a lot of people will say, like when I was a pro-life activist, people will say, well, you must not know anyone that's had an abortion. That's why you're pro-life. And the fact of the matter is that I know a lot of people who've had abortions. A lot of people who've suffered in their family, in their marriage, as an adult, after an abortion. So I've witnessed it, I've seen it. And when I worked at Louisiana Right to Life, I would go to conferences, I would have these tables, and I would talk to people about their stories. And I was so moved by these stories. So I became more and more pro-life, basically, because I'm just listening to people and hearing what they have to say, especially their time after abortion. And there's this story that really moved me, so I apologize if you heard this one already, but this is a story that I've heard about this woman who came into this country as an immigrant, who wanted a better life for herself, for her family. Her parents actually sacrificed a lot for her to come here, and it was, when she got pregnant at 26, it was actually a huge shock to the family. And so what do you think the family wanted from her? An abortion, right? Because we sacrificed for you to come to the States. Why would you waste all your money that you're supposed to send back home to your family on this baby? Right? So then when she told her boyfriend about the pregnancy, what do you think he said? I'm not ready. I'm not ready for that. It's not that serious. What do you think he wanted of her? An abortion. So this baby's grandparents wanted her to have an abortion. This baby's father wanted her to have an abortion. But this woman didn't want to have an abortion. And it was actually the fear of God that prevented her from having an abortion. She was afraid of going to hell, basically. But because she chose life, the grandparents disowned her. Her parents disowned her, the baby's grandparents. And the father loved her. Right? So this is a lot of people's stories. At the time, Planned Parenthood's marketing campaign, I have a background in public relations, their marketing campaign was every child a wanted child. Every child a wanted child. Right? Doesn't that have a nice kind of ring to it? Every child a wanted child. Right? This child was an unwanted child. Unwanted by the father, unwanted by the grandparents. And in fact was a burden. Some people even say why would you want to bring a baby into a world of suffering? Why would you want a baby to be born without a father? Why would you want a baby to be unwanted by their grandparents? Right? But she still chose life. And this was the 90s. This was the 90s, so it was much more taboo to be pregnant outside of wedlock. So she would walk around at work with her big old pregnant belly with no ring on her finger, and everyone was talking about her. It was a very different culture. Very different culture then than now. It's still a little bit taboo, but not like in the 90s. So because of that woman's choice, I'm here. That was my mom. That story is about my mom. That baby was me. Top left picture, that's my mom at 26, pregnant. She was pregnant in those first two pictures, actually. That picture is me as a potato baby. I love that image so much. I just want to pinch my own cheeks. Okay. When I was 2-ish years old, my mom brought me to the Philippines to meet my grandparents, and she was like, no, this is not the way. Basically, my mom was like, you're going to love her. And then they just had to meet me. Look at those pigtails. All right, and they loved me. My grandparents loved me. Those were my Lola and my Lolo. And they loved me. They did. When I found out all of this, I didn't grow up knowing all this information. I didn't find out until I was 18 about it. Like my grandparents literally, when my mom sent pictures of her ultrasounds and pregnancy pictures, they mailed it back with X's on her stomach. Like that's what they wanted, right? So when I heard that story, I was an 18-year-old. And I was surprised by that because my Lola loved me. Like, I was her favorite. She taught me how to French braid. She had diabetes, so I would always make sure she had fruit next to her bed, and I would sleep in her bed with her when she lived with us here in the States. And I was the most like her. Out of all her daughters and granddaughters in personality, we were the same, very similar. She wasn't Catholic, but she went to a Christian church, and they did similar to the sign of peace. And I was told by members of her community, that she would just shake every single person's hand. She would go up and the whole the peace thing is done. She's still shaking everyone's hand. She wants to shake every single person's hand. And she was just she was such a lady, you know what I mean? And what do I mean? That she would walk up to a door and wait for someone to open it. She was just that's cool. Anyway, I love my Lola. I was most like her, so you can kind of get a sense of who I am as a person because of her. So I was surprised that she ever would have wanted my mom to have an abortion. And perhaps maybe that's why she loved me like that, because she would always tell me things like, you're the apple of your mom's eye. So I grew up with kind of these identity issues that I told y'all about in the first talk, because I knew that I didn't have a father, right? But when I was 5, my mom got married. This day was the day of my adoption. Intra-family adoption, which I would later find out is what it's called, because it wasn't 2-parent adoption, it was one parent adopting me after a marriage. So I was born Krista Dellempines, and now I'm Krista Corbello because of that adoption. So my parents got married. I was the little flower girl in their wedding. He adopted me. Corbello actually means beautiful heart. That family adopting me was a sign of their beautiful heart. That I didn't feel any different for being adopted, and I felt still very loved by the Corbello family. So that was the day of my adoption. This is probably, I don't know how old I was, but it was actually somewhere in Texas, because my grandfather, my Lolo, was He worked on a boat, and he would go all the way from the Philippines to Texas, really a long way. It's like a 24-hour flight. Imagine how long it takes on a boat. And he loved me, and my mom said she never really got to see my Lolo with little girls, even though my mom is also one of 3 girls. I'm one of the oldest of 3 girls, just like my mom, and they're super far apart in age. So she never got to see her dad with a little girl. But when my mom saw him with me, he was just like following me around like my little shadow, and he was just so interested in everything that I was doing. So they loved me with a special love. So like I said, I didn't grow up with my biological father, so I always had this kind of like wound of fatherlessness. And like I told you in the first talk, like I suffered with this orphan mentality, and I've always felt like something was missing, and so I was searching for it in so many different ways. And I went through all the stages of grief that one goes through when you don't know your father. And when I was in college, specifically my senior year, I was getting to that phase of grief. And it's not linear, by the way. I don't want you to think that it's like, okay, you go from phase 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then it's acceptance. No, it's actually much more complicated than that. We can talk about complicated grief at lunch. I was getting to a phase of acceptance. So I had gone through anger as a teenager, like I'm going to prove myself in the world, and I was like angrily a good person. Like when one day my biological father meets me, he's going to regret not knowing me because I'm such an awesome person. Like that's a weird way to be a good person, but that's who I was. So in college, I was like praying. I went to like healing masses 6 months straight, and I was like saying, like, Lord, heal me of my father wound. Like I won't be able to move forward in my vocation unless you heal me of this. And I expected God to like just take out my wound, no more wound. And that is not what happened. The day before my 22nd birthday, my biological father liked my Facebook page. At the time, it was just for my little original music, and it said like his name liked Krista Corbello. And I was like, what? That's you. I know that's you. And I told my mom, and when I told my mom, she was like so ominously like, oh, it's happening. And I was like, what does that mean? What are you saying right now? And she was like, I knew he would not find you. Like, you post all these YouTube videos, and like, why do you, we're so public on social media? Like, I knew that he would find you one day. And he did. He found me on Facebook, and apparently he had watched all of my YouTube videos, and he felt like he knew me. He felt like he got to see me and know me, and he wanted to know me. He reached out to my mom asking for forgiveness. He reached out to me asking for forgiveness. And when I think of that prayer, those 6 months of praying, going to healing mass, like, God, I want you to heal me of my father wound. I didn't think it was going to take 7 years. I thought he was going to, no more, you're good, you're healed. No, it was like a process, like a 7-year process of like continually learning how to forgive this man who left me as a fetus, as a little baby. And then when I did meet him and get to know him, I told him about my pro-life work, and I knew that I only knew my mom's side of the story, so I asked him, like, this was probably not the right setting. It was at IHOP. So, do I recommend life-altering conversations over pancakes? Not really. Do not watch my leadership, whatever, example here. But I asked him, you know, are you glad my mom didn't abort me? Who does that? Me, apparently, at 24. So I asked him that, and he started crying. And he told me, of course I'm glad your mom didn't abort you. Of course I'm glad to have met you. Of course. But he said, men hurt too after abortion. And he was crying, men hurt too. And he told me that after my mom, he got another woman pregnant, and she had an abortion. He was basically the same role as in the situation with my mom, but that woman got an abortion. My mom chose life. That woman had an abortion because of the pressure of the circumstances. And like he told me about his journey and all the things that he needed to be forgiven of after the abortion. You know, and the psychology research is there. Like what happens after abortion is very interesting for men and women. It's very different responses. For him, it was like a lot of anger, addiction. Men response to after abortion and like those kinds of traumatic experiences look a certain way. And he was weeping over that. And I knew in my heart that I knew it was important for me to like be gentle in that moment whenever he shared that with me. So I was giving him resources, I was telling him books to read, retreats to go to, because I worked at Louisiana Red Life, that's what I was used to doing. Then he took me to the airport, I was on this airplane, I was flying back home to Louisiana, and I came visit my mom, who also was living, I think Vegas actually, anyway, West Coast. I was going back to Louisiana. I was on this airplane, I was thinking about the conversation I just had at IHOP. and we're taking off on the runway, literally taking off. And I just thought to myself, like, that was my sibling. That was my sibling. And then I started ugly crying, like real bad ugly crying. I had snot running down my nose. I was like shaking, and I was in the middle seat, of all places. I couldn't really hide. And so I was thinking, the people around me were like, this girl doesn't know how to fly. She's not good. She does not like flying. And I was like having existential crisis. Like, that sibling died where I could have died. But I'm here, and my sibling's not. And then I went through the better part of a year, was like post-abortion grief, basically. Different than someone who had an abortion, but still very, very significant. And I was struggling with my own identity because I didn't think that I was worthy of life. I was feeling unworthy of life. Because my sibling didn't even get a chance at life. And here I was, like, yeah, I had a lot of suffering, okay, but at least I'm alive. So it's this survivor's guilt coupled with existential doom, and then, mistrust of parents, and it caused me so much anxiety and depression for like a long, long time. And it was the first time in my life that I asked God, like, can you meet me here? Can you even be good in this? I don't even feel that right now. And by the grace of God, he resurrected that Good Friday. It took a long time. There was a lot of different steps in my healing process, including spiritual direction and counseling. It kind of propelled me towards the work that I do now, which is post-abortion healing for sibling survivors of abortion. I ended up going to this thing called Given. It's a Catholic Women's Leadership Forum. And there you bring an action plan. So young women, if you're interested in that, we can talk about it at lunch. You bring an action plan and apostolate for the church, a way to serve the church. And my application was what is now called Even This Way, which is post-abortion sibling survivor grief intervention. That's a long thing to say. I also got my master's in psychology at Divine Mercy University, which is basically like an extension of that action plan. So the action plan, basically, you have a mentor for the next year, and they ask, how are you implementing the thing that you applied in at this forum? It was a leadership forum. And then Divine Mercy University gave me this space to research everything that I basically just told you about my life. I had language for it now. I didn't have the term existential doom. I didn't have post-abortion sibling survivor. That was all in the literature that I was reading, and it gave me 2.5 years of research, gave me language for like 3 years of grief, basically. And that's what Even This Way was born out of, right? It was born out of the resurrection in my own life. And I know too, like that's one way that God has used me, because God did it in my own heart, did it in my own life. And I'm living out of that healing, out of that Easter, right? And I also know that's not the only way that God uses me, right? I used to think this is the only way that I'll be a speaker. This is the only way that I'm going to be able to share. And it's not been true. He surprises me. God is a God of surprises. He's a suffering servant. He's a servant leader. Everyone expected like a Messiah to come on a horse and like conquer. But what did he do? He came in a manger. He took on flesh, and he died on the cross. He is the God of surprises. And so allow him to be the God of surprises even in your own life too, and how you serve the church and the world. A little family introductions, okay? So that's me. This is actually the picture that was in that textbook I told you all about. That I was like, what? That's crazy. Anyway, you can't tell it's me because of all that stuff. This is my little goddaughter I told you all about, Melody. That's my sister Isabel. That's Francesca, we call her Frankie. That's my mom and my dad. This was in Milwaukee, I think, in 2020. That was cool. Talk, it was a Democrats for Life situation. This is my Lola. Love her. She died in 2013. That was one of my last pictures with her ever. After a show that I was in, which we can talk about at lunch. That was the last musical she ever saw me in. This was me also in DC with that sign, I mourn my sibling lost to abortion, which people surprisingly have a lot to say about. They're very interested in that. I think it kind of goes under the radar of what you're normally used to hearing, so because they have that element of surprise, almost like, whoa, I never thought about that. So Anyway, that's always an interesting conversation starter. This is my favorite picture. These are my favorite pictures with my mom. That's my kindergarten graduation. That's my college graduation. That's my grad school graduation that just happened in May of this year. She didn't really change. Like, she still looks the same. I love the life I've gotten to live, even though it's been a very surprising life. I feel called to help build a culture of life. I think there's many ways that people can do that. I think, obviously, my testimony is geared towards abortion. I think there's other life issues that matter and that we've experienced and that we can speak into. When I was living in Louisiana, for instance, the death penalty is like a huge thing in Louisiana. In fact, our governor wants to expand it here in Texas. The death penalty is a huge thing. In California, they just passed Proposition 1, which allows for abortion all 9 months of pregnancy. It's horrible. That's literally evil. If Prop 1 didn't pass this past term, if Prop 1 didn't pass, people still would have been able to have abortions up until the point of viability, and after that, in the cases of life and health of the mother. But now in the California Constitution, people can get an abortion for all 9 months of pregnancy, which most people are against late-term abortion. Most people are against late-term abortion. But in California, it's granted in our Constitution, and $20 million are going to be allotted to bringing in people from other states to get abortions, to pay for their lodging, to pay for their travel, to pay for child care, right? But only if they obtain an abortion, right? Imagine those dollars helping people be parents. Imagine those dollars helping people actually raise their children, because abortion doesn't solve things like abuse. Right? If you get an abortion, then what? You're going back to an abusive home. Allot those $20 million to getting people out of dangerous situations. Right? There's so many better ways. So Prop 1 was a tragedy that happened in California, especially in comparison to in Louisiana. They had Amendment 1 in 2020, that year, protecting the unborn from abortion in the Louisiana Constitution. Basically the exact opposite thing of what I just said. Right? And more people voted for Amendment 1 in Louisiana, which, by the way, is a bipartisan pro-life state. More people voted for Amendment 1 in Louisiana than for any president in Canada. More people were pro-life. They cared more about that amendment being a part of the Louisiana Constitution, that the unborn were protected by the Louisiana Constitution from abortion, than they voted for either candidate. So that is such a stark contrast from what now I'm living in California. So I'm very much, I know, okay, what I'm doing in California is very important, needed. We had a Grow Beyond Grow panel at my workplace with the Caltech students. It was awesome. But I want to talk to you about the culture of life and what John Paul II wrote in Evangelium Vitae, Gospel of Life. To be truly a people at the service of life, we must propose these truths constantly and courageously from the very first proclamation of the gospel, and thereafter in catechesis, in various forms of preaching, in personal dialogue, and in all educational activity. The gospel of life is to be celebrated above all in daily living, which should be filled with self-giving love for others. It is in this context heroic actions too are born, and everyday heroism, made up of gestures of sharing, big or small, which build up an authentic culture of life. Now, this document's huge. He also talks about building a civilization of love. A civilization of love. A culture of life is also a civilization of love. Is a civilization of truth, he says in that document. So it's very important for us to look for the truth, to seek the truth, because the Holy Spirit and God, who is truth itself, he will reveal himself to you. So continue seeking, continue the dialogue, continue self-giving love in all forms. Because if you can't give of yourself in this setting, in a safe environment, in the little ways of everyday life, what makes you think you're going to be able to give of yourself in your vocation? What makes you think you're going to be able to give of yourself in heroic ways, like some of the lives of the saints that we talked about earlier? That's what it means to be a saint, is to be able to do it, yes, in those magnanimous ways, like Perpetua and Felicity. They gave their life heroically for the faith. But that did not come without these little acts of everyday living and little acts of self-service. So let's build a culture of life and a civilization of love together. Have a little information for you. I think I have my Even This Way healing thing in there for you, but the QR code right here is specifically for a panel, an Even This Way panel, if you're interested in listening to, or if any of you have a sibling who died by abortion. It's a panel where I kind of present my research that I did at Divine Mercy University, what everything I read in the psychological literature at the time about what it means to have a sibling who died by abortion, what grief things are happening in the family, what a sibling survivor of abortion, that's what I call us, what they're experiencing, what that looks like for men and women. So this panel has me presenting my research as well as the testimonies of other siblings and how they relate to what the research says. So it's a little bit about psychological data and a little bit about personal testimony. So if you're interested in listening to that, it's on my website, but that QR code also goes straight to it. If you're interested, you can find me on socials if you have any questions about this. If I don't get to talk to you today, I'm happy to talk to y'all at lunch about all those things that I said we would talk about. That is it. I don't even think I have any. Oh, I do. Wow. Good job, Krista. Christian leadership. A couple of questions for reflection. How am I called to build a culture of life? What can I learn more about to promote a culture of life? How can I be a source of healing to those hurt by abortion? So thank you again for listening to that one.